Everyone. Yes, so here we'll start. So, good evening to all faculty members, staff, and my dear students from National Forensic Sciences University. So, now formally I will introduce our today's speaker to all of you, and it's a great privilege for me to introduce Professor Kim Wolff from King's College London, who is our distinguished speaker today. And formally, I will read out her background and little bit academic details, her research interests, those things. So Professor Wolff did her PhD in 1990 from University of Leeds with the topic pharmacokinetics of methadone. She is a faculty member and presently she is a faculty member at King's College London from 2002 till date, and presently she is the senior professor and director of King's Forensics. I think this is the forensic division, as well as she is also the director of Drugs Control Center at King's College London. And this Drugs Control Center at King's College, you can imagine like a center of excellence in drug analysis, and this is one of the best in the world. And Professor Kim is also the panel member of UK Secretary of State for Transport Medical Advisory Panel on Alcohol, Drugs and Substance Misuse and Driving. She is also a WHO Expert Committee member on drug dependence. She is having more than 30 years of academic experience and having more than 100 publications in high quality international research journals. Her research interests is mainly developing biological marker for drug misuse. Apart from that, as I was going through her research credentials, she has done a lot of work in the various areas of forensic analytical chemistry. I would say some aspects of nanotechnology or application of nanomaterial-based forensic screening, say smart fingerprinting, developing latent fingerprint not only to develop identify the individual but rather extract some additional information in the form of a trace level drugs or some psychotropic substances present in it, use of mass spectrometry for analysis of fingerprinting, and so on. And not only, she has established a company and entrepreneurship with some of her colleagues, maybe in the name Intelligent Fingerprinting Limited. You can Google it, you can go through it. They have developed many products, and mainly they have developed non-invasive drug screening devices. So taking a little bit of your say sweat sample, they can analyze within a few minutes if there is any drugs or any substance of abuse present in it. So this is really a good time for all of us, and I believe this session will be very useful for all of us. We are working in the same similar area. Professor Kim, to brief you a little bit about our university, we are a national university in India means the university which is under the central government, federal government, and it is under the Ministry of Home Affairs. And forensic science in India, forensic science is important anywhere, and this is the only university. It was the brainchild of our present Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi. Earlier, he was Chief Minister of this province. And from last year, earlier we was a state university, now have become a central university. We have different programs in broad area of forensic science, biotechnology, nanotechnology, food science, even clinical psychology, which is maybe your area of interest also. And we are also have a active research group. We, as you can see, the faculty members present here, they all are mainly related to this forensic analytical science, biotechnologies, pharmacokinetics, and our students are also from forensic science and other background, forensic science and analytical chemistry, biotechnology background. So with this short introduction, I would love to formally invite you and I would request you to begin with your today's lecture.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And it's a pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. So I'm now going to try and raise my um, presentation onto the screen, and I'm going to be talking to you about drug driving and how that sits in the UK at the moment. Sorry, I might need a little bit of technical help. I haven't used Google Meetings before, so I'm not sure how this works. Can any of you, can you see my presentation at the moment?
Not yet.
Professor Kim, can you see the present now button on your screen? Present now button.
Yes.
So you click on it,
Yep.
then you get either your entire screen or a window. I think better you choose your entire screen. Uh,
Yep.
then you select it and share. That button you option share. Then
Okay.
it will be shared.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Hi.
You have to go back to your presentation.
Yep.
Yeah, you just click on the full screen mode, then it will be visible to all of us. Thank you.
Okay, let me just try this. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, good. All right, well, apologies again for being a bit late. I can't see you now, but I hope you can see me in the presentation. So, as you've heard, I'm Professor Wolff and Director of King's Forensics at King's College London, and have a background in analytical forensic and addiction science. And I thought it might just be useful very quickly to tell you that within King's Forensics, we have the Drug Control Centre, which is a World Anti-Doping Laboratory, Forensic Genetics, which is an accredited DNA analysis laboratory. We have a great partnership with the City of London Police, who have their fingerprint enhancement laboratory on our premises. And we also have a mass spec facility that is looking at, amongst other things, a cannabis testing service. So we are predominantly involved with mass spectrometry and other analytical systems. So moving on to the topic of today's presentation. So I'm going to talk to you about road traffic collisions. And as you know, this is a big public health problem. And the World Health Organization are very interested in this, and note that it's not just the individuals that are involved in crashes, but their survivors, families, friends, and other caregivers. And really, a fatal road traffic accident has an enormous toll on individuals, communities, and national economies. And the importance of this work has also been shared by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So it really is a big area of forensic science, in fact. So I'm going to talk to you about where we are in the UK with our drug driving legislation. So back in 2011, there was a report by the government who said that we should have a specified drug driving legislation to go alongside our drink driving legislation. And there was a terms of reference were produced in 2012, and I was asked to chair the government expert panel. And we had to decide which compounds were most important. And as you can see, I don't think there are any surprises on the list here. So we were asked to look at the scientific findings and consider the prevalence of the drug in our society before we could suggest recommendations for the new legislation, because in 2011 we had no drug driving legislation, and we were required to try and pick people up who were using drugs under an impairment rule regulation, and this wasn't working very well. So as you can see, we found that cannabis, as in most countries, was the most common behind alcohol, and then cocaine, amphetamine, and prescribed drugs. So no real surprises. So I think what did surprise us was that there was an awful lot written about cannabis use and the impact that it has on driving. And I think we've established that cannabis was used a lot in the UK, but also that there was a significant dose-related decrement in driving with increased doses of cannabis. And that was whether it was in a simulator, in a laboratory, or from forensic traffic data. And we saw that increased blood concentrations of THC were significantly associated with risk. A meta-analysis showed that above a concentration of 3.7 mg per litre, individuals were found to be impaired to the same level as somebody who was drink driving with alcohol levels at 50 milligrams per 100 mils of blood. So we were very interested to look at cannabis as our most common substance, and we looked at the concentrations that you legislation, then there would be a lot of interest. You can see that the acute use is very much higher in THC concentration than near or daily use. So the risk of a road traffic accident with cannabis was also investigated. And again, there is a huge amount in the literature out there. And it says that there is a significant increased crash risk when the THC in blood is greater than 5 micrograms per litre. There's also a relationship between cannabis use and alcohol use. I don't know if anybody else can hear this, but I can hear an echo of myself. I feel that I'm ahead of where the video is. When the THC in blood is greater than 5 micrograms per litre. So the other factor that we wanted to introduce was that alcohol use and THC use were also a poor combination for driving, and the higher the concentration of THC and alcohol, the greater the risk of a crash. We also looked at cocaine, which was, again, our second most common drug, and odds ratios from the scientific literature showed that this was 3 times the risk of being seriously injured. And we also looked at the metabolite benzoylecgonine, as this was considered to be an important marker of the use of cocaine. And we decided that we should set a threshold for cocaine and BZE. So here's some odds ratios that have been produced in the literature. And you can see that the risk of having a road traffic accident with cocaine on board compared to not having cocaine on board is approximately 2 times the risk. We also looked at amphetamine, and the scientific data largely refers to amphetamine, but of course it's a large class of drugs. And we were also interested in methamphetamine and MDMA, ecstasy. The confusing factor here was that amphetamine is also a drug prescribed for the treatment of ADHD, and there are many medicines, certainly available in the UK, who metabolize to amphetamine. So there were lots of different considerations here. We found that there was some data around amphetamine and actually improving performance. It does, as we know, all stimulants do increase alertness and risk-taking. And it was found that amphetamine could suppress sleepiness. But the DRUID, which was the very big European study that looked at driving under the influence of drugs, found that amphetamine actually did not compensate for poor driving produced by sleep deprivation. So, as I've mentioned, amphetamine has been used to maintain concentration and wakefulness at very low doses. We found in the UK that drivers had reasonably high concentrations of the drug in their body at the time of the accident. So evidence for driving risk, again, odds ratios suggested that there was a 4 to 8 times the risk of having a road traffic accident if you consumed amphetamine or methamphetamine. The other drug that we looked at was ketamine, which is increasingly used in the big cities in London. And we found that driving under the influence of ketamine was potentially risky because it was used in small doses and could cause disturbances of perception. Again, we've looked at the use of cannabis more generally in the population as well as roadside screening, and we were satisfied that ketamine use is out there and being used by drivers. So this was part of our recommendation to the government. The other big class of drugs that we looked at were the prescribed controlled drugs. In the UK, a controlled drug has a legal definition and it has to be prescribed by a qualified professional. And in our case, the 2 big classes of prescribed drugs were benzodiazepines, sedatives and anxiolytics, and these were found to be very commonly used by drivers, and they were the most frequent toxicological finding in Europe after alcohol, and it tended to be, interestingly, women aged over 35 who were daytime drivers. As you know, there are lots of benzodiazepines in the drug class. In fact, we have 19 different medicines in this country. And it was found that benzodiazepines can have a poorer impact on driving behavior in older patients, particularly when drugs are longer acting or they're consumed in larger quantities. And you can see that aged over 60 years, benzodiazepines were associated with a crash risk of over 5 times compared to somebody who wasn't prescribed these drugs. Benzodiazepines are also very much prescribed in the UK, and we've broken down and looked at the different types of benzodiazepines, and you can see that they tend to have a varied risk, but nevertheless some risk in terms of having causing a risk of a road traffic accident. We also found from a study looking at benzodiazepine and driving that the odds ratio of mixing benzodiazepines and alcohol was significantly increased and was over 7 times the risk. And this is a feature that we found with all drugs, that if people took drugs, whether they were prescribed or illicit, alongside alcohol, then the risk of a road traffic collision was significantly increased. I'm just going to show you this one. As you can see, that individual benzodiazepines have individual risk factors. The other arena that we were interested in was opioid medication. And again, there are lots of different compounds within this drug class. And usually scientific reports, morphine, methadone, and diamorphine together. In America, it may be oxycodone and hydrocodone. And so the risk, again, is ranged between 2 and 10 times compared to not having any opioid on board. And here are some different studies. And again, the difficulty in teasing out individual drugs is that sometimes medicinal or illicit opioids were grouped together with several compounds. So the cutoffs that we eventually got to are those here. And these were specifically applied to each individual compound, and we've developed what was known as a strict liability offence. So the offence was only caused if the person had a concentration above these drug levels in their blood at the time of the accident. So from 2011 to 2015, we did the background work and the recommendations, and in 2015, the legislation became law, and it was a strict liability offence. So where have we been from then? So in the first 316 days, there were 8,500 convictions for drug driving. And this was across all of our 43 UK police forces. And as you might expect, they were positive predominantly for cannabis and for cocaine. In 2018, there were 40 police forces, and in the UK, all our individual police forces are autonomous, so they decide when they're going to test and the extent to which they test. But nevertheless, we could see that there had been a great increase in police finding drivers with drugs on board, and the number of disqualified drivers, which means their license was taken away from them, was 29,000 drivers. We also found that prosecutions for causing death by careless or dangerous driving had increased from 2014 to 2019. If we look at the confirmatory test results, as you can see, the most common drug found in cases was THC, so cannabis, and the legislative limit is 2. And there were 1,049 blood tests for THC in the first 18 months of the legislation coming into being, and the mean concentration in blood was 4.3 micrograms per litre, which we thought showed that we were somewhere in the region of having an appropriate cutoff. We recognised also in our population that drivers were multiple drug users, so 35% of drivers had more than one drug detected in the confirmatory blood test, which was an important feature to recognise. There were various different endorsements, so that we have lots of different offences for driving in the UK, and there were 9,000 odd different offences for different types of driving infringements. And as you can see, as we had found in our research, that alcohol use, THC and driving were also common. This is a single one-day scan of data. And on this one day, there were 57 cases across England and Wales where there was one alcohol and one THC offence by one driver. So again, evidence that drivers are using both compounds. We also looked at driving risk with alcohol. So if there was a blood alcohol concentration between 80 and 120 milligrams per 100 mils of blood, and different drug use combined, then you can see that the odds ratio significantly increases. So the message to the government has been that we have to think about alcohol use with drug use because there is a significantly increased risk of having a road traffic accident if drivers are combining different drugs. And then finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about contributing factors. So the police in the UK also collect data on what we call contributing factors. And over 65% of road traffic collisions involve contributing factors. And the main ones are driving at excessive speed, not wearing a seatbelt, mobile phone use, and a failure to look properly, or a combination of one or two of these. So for instance, amphetamine users like to drive at excessive speed, or stimulant users tend to take risks, drive at excessive speed, and are often not wearing a seatbelt. Other drug users often fail to look properly. So when we talk about the driving situation forensically, there are lots of different combined features that may impact. Here's a slide that just looks at speed and other contributing factors. So we have a blood alcohol concentration between 50 and 80 milligrams per 100 mils of blood, looking away from the road, and a hands-free phone call. And you can see that the odds ratio increases if these are combined. And similarly, blood alcohol between 50 and 80. And interestingly, between 50 and 80 is legal in the UK because we have a cutoff of 80 mgs per 100 mils of alcohol, which is higher than most jurisdictions around the world, I have to say. So driving, blood alcohol concentration, and looking away from the road, again, you can see that significantly increases the risk of a road traffic collision. So a complicated issue that we're still trying to unravel, and we currently have a panel looking at whether we need a high-risk offender scheme for drug drivers where they will have to undergo treatment or a medical assessment before they're allowed to drive again. So that was very much a whistle-stop tour through drug driving legislation and something of the features that we're looking at here in the UK. Thank you very much, and any questions? And I'll just try and come out of this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. A very informative session, and now this forum is open for discussion. So any questions, queries from faculty and students, you can put your question in the chat box.
Now I frightened everybody off. So what drug driving legislation do you have in India?
Drug driving legislation, Dr. Prashanto, what we have in terms of law? No, she's asking what type of legislation we have. So, few things, madam, I have just query to ask you. So first of all, also have you in your study or in your group, in the forensics, King's Forensics Division, do you also work on the illegal routes for this type of drugs from where it comes, or you also work on stopping or eliminating those type of routes to enter the drugs to UK?
So we're analytical laboratories. We work closely with the border and customs. So we will analyze unknown substances, for instance. And in the UK, there's something called crossing borders, and it's not international borders, but it's county lines. So it's crossing county lines where we know drugs are being crossed. And we also know, interestingly, that drug drivers are usually involved in more serious crime than you might imagine. So we work with forensic providers and different police forces in that way as well.
Yeah, Dr. Shah, you want to tell something?
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Prasenji.
Hello.
Yes, well, ma'am, you asked a very pertinent question. We specifically don't have anything regarding to drug in the Motor Vehicle Act. I think in 2015, that was the first revision of the old act. And in 2019, they came out with certain suggestions where drugs can be incorporated. Apart from that, you know, Vehicle Act, we have a Motor Vehicle Act where penalties are essentially covered under like violation of road regulations, dangerous driving, or violation of some orders of authority. So there is no specific law separately which has been kept for Motor Vehicle Act in India. However, under NDPS Act, uh, National Drug Prohibition sections, this has been covered a little bit. I had a curiosity regarding your presentation, ma'am. When we talk about drugs, uh, you know, certain drugs, they also have medicinal effects, right? So
Yes.
does UK have the provision to differentiate on the basis of a dosage and the usage by individual, or it is something until unless you have a prescribed medicine, you cannot get hold of those drugs,
Yes.
like
Yeah, it's a good
ketamine.
point. So the government was very worried about legislation that would impact on prescribed medication, and we didn't want to worry people so that they would stop taking their medication. So there's part of the legislation is what's known as the medical defense. So if somebody has a legitimate prescription and their GP or doctor says that they're compliant and they're taking it appropriately, then they wouldn't be prosecuted. So it's called the medical defense. And we ask drivers with a prescription for a prescribed drug to carry that certificate put the certificate in the car, so that if they were stopped by a policeman, then they would be able to show evidence that they were taking the medication legitimately. However, the grey area is that if they were driving dangerously, then they could still be prosecuted, because in the UK, it's the driver's responsibility not to get into the car when they're unfit for driving. So if they were driving irregularly and it was thought that this was because they were on a prescribed medication, then they would still be prosecuted.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
You might be interested to know that the research that we're doing at the moment is very much looking at how we can collect evidential samples. So people don't like bloodletting at the roadside. Police officers don't feel comfortable about taking blood at the roadside, and at the moment our legislation is set up for blood. So we're looking at alternatives. We're thinking about fingerprints and oral fluid and dry blood spots as a different way of collecting samples at the roadside that might produce reliable results, but would be much easier for the driver and the police officer to collect.
So these are randomly done, or it is on the basis of certain
No, we don't
inputs
do
from.
random. Yeah, well, no, we very rarely do random stops. We only are the police officers are only allowed to stop somebody if they see somebody driving in an unsafe, careless way.
So it is only the police officers who are usually exposed to such kind of scenarios. What about forensic professionals? They are only based on laboratory, or they also go to the, let's say, scenarios like this?
The forensic officers will go out if there are fatal or big accidents. Then the forensic officers will go out. But as far as I know, they don't collect blood samples from the driver. The driver, if there isn't a blood sample collected at the scene, the driver has to go to the police station or the hospital, and a professional has to collect a sample.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Prasanjit.
Okay. So, Professor, we have some interest to know about the academic environment at your place. See, we are also running master's program. So, what do you, I mean, in a brief, if you see the what type of culture you adopt there, for example, for master's program, and could you highlight few points?
Yeah, so we have two master's programs. We have a Master of Science, a Master of Forensic Science, and this is accredited to the Chartered Society of Forensic Scientists in the UK, and it's a one-year program. And we have a master's degree in analytical science, which again is a one-year program. And so the analytical science tend to spend more time in the laboratory, looking at chromatography and immunoassay, etc., DNA analysis. And the forensic science do scenes of crime work. They will cover photography at the crime scene. They will be taught how to present in court as expert witnesses. We do a practical session where we take them to a courtroom, and we set up a court, and they have to present. So there's a mixture of practical workshops and theoretical learning. And then all of them do a research project at the end for 12 weeks where they have to collect some original data. And we try and send them out to forensic providers or for police forces so that their project is relevant to the forensic science field.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And little bit I would like to discuss about research activity you are presently pursuing. And especially I have gone through also, especially in Madam Professor, during 2008-10, those time you have some co-authored publications on smart fingerprinting, say detection of cocaine and other substances. And there was another I think Professor Russell, and maybe is he no more active?
David Russell has now retired, sadly, but he was in Norfolk in Norwich. We're still looking at this work. So we collect latent fingerprints and use them for drug screening. And I have a PhD student who is looking at alcohol tests using fingerprints. And we're also interested in recreational drug use. So we another PhD student is looking at ecstasy use and ketamine use and methamphetamine use to see if we can use fingerprints as a quick and easy tool for identifying the presence of drugs.
And also this non-invasive drug screening device, which I could see. So this is, I mean, there is a big library, many drugs or metabolites could be detected using it.
Yes, so as I'm sure you'll know from an immunoassay is a non-specific tool. So we can look we work with a small company called Intelligent Fingerprinting, and so we can look for cannabis, and we can look for opioids, and we can look for cocaine. We're trying to look for more specific compounds. So we're interested in ecstasy because it's a big clubbing drug here in the UK, and ketamine, which is another big clubbing drug. So we're trying to find a way of testing in clubs that is quick and easy and doesn't interfere too much with the clubber, so they can easily give a fingerprint rather than a blood or urine sample, for instance.
Okay, another little specific question, not related to your today's presentation, but I am interested because I was a little bit interested and done some multi-mass spectrometry and some nanotechnology based research during my postdoc. So this multi-analysis of fingerprint, so is it, means, how you do fit this fingerprint inside multi? Is it you have to nicely cut it and fit it in the multi plate and then you do it?
Yes, both of those. So you can collect fingerprints onto a special absorbent pad, and you can use that. So we've tried lots of different things. We've tried glass plates. We've tried small absorbent cover slips. We've tried, I can't remember what it's made of, but there. So we've tried a variety of different products.
Okay.
And we use banknotes as well, of course.
Yeah. Banknote, you have that cocaine detection from banknotes. Yeah, very interesting.
So what are your main research interests?
Well, to be honest, my background is not forensics. I'm a chemist, and then I did research on metal clusters, fluorescence spectroscopy, and here I am trying to apply different type of molecules or materials for explosive. Mainly my present research interest is explosive sensing, because those facilities I could develop here. Along with that, in your area, I'm trying to venture smart fingerprinting little bit. At least I have tried to develop few good nanomaterial based developer which could be used to develop latent fingerprinting. And I'm trying just a fundamental level, whether suppose a trace level explosive TNT or RDX is there. So along with imaging, can I detect through this fluorescence spectroscopy? So those few things I'm trying. So you can say materials for any type of forensic applications, mainly forensic analytical chemistry, imaging, as well as quantitative detection of various forensic analytes. Those things we are trying. And we have other faculty members. Dr. Shahas, he is basically forensic psychologist. We have also faculties from biotechnology, and they are trying different projects like collecting biological samples from different matrices and so on. So we are a new university, but we are all young faculty. We are trying hard to develop a truly quality research culture in this university. And I hope in future we will have some association. It will be very good to have your kind of help, cooperation for our venture. And so really it's nice talking to you. Is there any other questions, queries from other members? Yes, Dr. Shaha, you can.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Prasenjit. Professor Kim, I have one curiosity. Well, as mentioned by Dr. Prasenjit, yes, I started forensic psychology after joining this organization. But before that, I was interested in understanding the brain mechanisms. So my question specifically is regarding your amphetamines. Like, for example, in neuropsychology, we use amphetamines for rehabilitating ADHD kids, attention hyperactive disorder. Hello?
Yes,
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear
Yes, ma'am.
you.
Yes. So amphetamines, they basically release this dopamine and norepinephrine, and once they are released, they remain in the brain, so they're stimulated, right? So
Yeah.
and they remain for a longer period of time, let's say. So have you guys anytime tested the brain scans of all these individuals whom you have caught for these kind of drunken driving or something like that, means just corroborating with the brain modulation which the drug has made their brains to behave? Because
Yes, and it would be a nice thing to do, but I think we would struggle to get ethical approval to recruit. So we are interested in amphetamine and actually methylphenidate as well, because these are both fairly old drugs, and so we are interested, as you say, and particularly the anti-doping side of King's Forensics is very interested in the impact that amphetamines have on the brain, because brain doping has become a common way to describe the abuse of amphetamines in sportsmen and women. So it is a fascinating area, but trying to get ethical approval to do that kind of study, I think is quite tricky. Although having said that, we have a very big imaging department at King's, so it might be something that's worth looking at. And I think it would be really good to try and formulate some kind of research allegiance with you guys and try and do some work together. I think that would be really good.
Yeah, that will be a really nice initiative, and we will love to be a part of your group. Thank you, Professor Kim. Professor Maiti, you can take over.
Yeah, Professor Wolff, what would be your suggestion to us? We all are young faculties. We are starting our career. So, what would be your suggestion? How we could pursue quality research?
Well, I think it would probably be sensible to have another meeting, so that we can decide that, because I think it would be helpful to know how forensic science works in India, for instance, and we could start by sharing some lectures on master's programs, because I'm sure our master's students would be interested to know how forensic science works in India. So I think there are several different ways that we could probably think about working together going forwards.
Yeah, so of course you also need some approval, but I would request you if we could have some kind of MOU, memorandum of understanding, and through that we could cooperate, we could jointly do some research and academic activity that would be good for us. And
yeah, I think I'm sure that we could do something along those lines.
Sure. So I'll be in touch with you, Professor. And so from all of us, from all of NFSU family, I would like to thank you. And it was really a very informative session, and definitely it will be good for all of us. And I believe I'll be in touch, we'll be in touch, and we'll have some association. And I think that's the way although sitting in different parts of the globe, but we both are doing academic activity, and we must help and cooperate with each other to grow further.
Okay,
so
that sounds very
this,
good to me.
yes. So with this, I think there is no other. If there is no more questions, if there is any other questions, someone can raise your hands. Otherwise, I have finished the points which I got, and so I would like to conclude, Professor. Once again, thank you very much. I will be writing you time to time, and let's see what we could do jointly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again for your kind invitation, and it was nice speaking to you all this morning, or afternoon in your case.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's the end of this session. Thank you everyone for joining in this expert session on drink and drug driving. Thank you very much. This one.